The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business, from $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters at Real Estate Marketing, Ardor SEO.
Welcome to the Icons of Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Patty Teal. Let me tell you about today's guest. Neal Collins is the co-founder of Latitude, a regenerative-focused real estate sales, consulting, and development firm that works across North America. He is laser-focused on combining his business and investing experience with his values to create a more sustainable, just, and resilient world. Welcome, Neal.
Patty, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
It's a pleasure to have you here. As I was doing my research on you and your company, I just thought it sounded so beautiful the way the properties gel with the environment and are sustainable. So I have so many questions to ask you. But first, I'd like to start with your journey. How did you get into real estate in the first place, and how did you end up in this particular field?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, because really what we're doing right now with Latitude and regenerative real estate is really the sum of our experiences. I grew up in South Louisiana in the college town of Baton Rouge. And it was there that I became witness to multiple 10,000 year catastrophic events, be it Hurricane Katrina or other hurricanes. So it's just like our towns getting leveled. And so I grew up with this backdrop of climate chaos, and I didn't really know it at the time, but I was looking for ways in which I could contribute, and I was getting called an altruist coming out of college. I thought law school was going to be the route to go, but I ended up taking a different path, which was, how do I see the world on somebody else's dime? And that happened to be through the Peace Corps. And I just became enamored with learning different cultures and integrating in different communities and seeing just different ways in which people are living around the world, and having place be such an expression, from food to architecture to language, to where I thought, I really want to gravitate in this field of community development, but how do we meet sustainable development? And so I started working after graduate school with my then girlfriend, now wife, Alyssa, and we get to work on some incredible projects, like in India and in the Maldives, doing threatened species conservation and climate change adaptation work. And I got to tell you, like, it's almost like living life backwards, where I started my career without shoes on a white sand beach with coconut trees, like getting to swim in the Maldivian waters every day. And that's an amazing lifestyle. And I was so passionate about the work, but coming out of graduate school with a ton of debt, not being able to make ends meet, getting really frustrated with the nonprofit world. I mean, you start with this amazing project idea, and by the time you go through all the painstaking details of putting that together to then getting it funded, you end up with something completely different. And I just became so utterly disenfranchised with that whole process. My boss was telling me I needed to go get a PhD and publish more papers if I wanted to advance a career. And that just, is that really the path of climbing up the academia ladder? And I didn't want to do that. And I ended up listening to a podcast, which, I love this medium, about real estate investing. And I think I got hooked on the same pitch and the same concept that a lot of people do, which is financial freedom.
Yes.
And you can create passive income in your life to free you up to go do whatever you wanted to do. And, coming from living on an island and having all the beach time that I could possibly imagine, I knew I didn't want to go like sit on the beach and drink Mai Tais. I really wanted to do something.
Not for very long anyway.
Right, a couple of days, that's amazing.
Yeah. Right.
A couple of years, I don't know, you start to get really tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, maybe I can work in real estate so that I can then make money to go do good somewhere else. And that was the dichotomy. That was kind of the best of the thinking around that 2008, 2010 era of like, you're not doing good. You're making money so that then you can like give money to different causes or do whatever you're really passionate about. And I jumped in. My wife was extremely reluctant. There was definitely an expletive or two whenever I told her that we were going to get into real estate, or I wanted to get into real estate. Alyssa happens to be one of those people that she can talk on the wrong number for 30 minutes. And I think that she's just a shoo-in for the kind of relationship building that goes really well in this business.
Yes.
But we started trying to figure out how to invest in properties, and the first one we got was a complete ramshackle little bungalow, but got to learn about seller financing in order to make that deal work. And then we started to invest in smaller multi-family properties and really getting our hands dirty, and started to scale a team and started to figure out like, we're looking for the product, and we're looking for the money, and we're looking for the people. And I think, I want to skip over this side of the story. And this is where a lot of people really want to dig in. But I will say, whatever you put your energy into, you end up really building that. And we built a very conventional real estate company out of Portland, Oregon. And we put our heads down for almost a decade and grinded. And we woke up and we realized we're really miserable. We had a property management company with a couple hundred single family and multi-family homes. We had a brokerage of about 17 agents. We really weren't making the kind of money that we thought that we would be making. We were getting handed lawsuits or threats of lawsuits for little trivial matters of one of our agents used a copyright image on his team's website, or a potential renter claimed racial discrimination on our leasing coordinator, like really big, heady, weighty, emotional things. And we just realized there is so much power and opportunity within real estate and how it connects community, and it really influences every facet of our lives. And I see real estate being such a potentially tremendous lever or catalyst for change. So what does that look like? Who's doing sustainability in real estate, and how do we do this differently? And right around 2019, when you do that survey, you realize sustainability in real estate has been dominated by great things, energy efficiency, electrification, and solar panels. And don't get me wrong, like that's needed. But if we put a solar panel on every single roof in the world, we're not going to be overcoming like truly the poly crisis that we're facing. And it seemed to really be missing out on the things that we really cared about, which is like community and ecology and health and wellness and like the spirit of home. And I think what really drove this home for us was that, the elders in our lives, many of them had come down with terminal or life threatening diagnoses of cancer. And we just had a child, and we started to read these statistics that like 1 in 2 males are going to be developing cancer in their lifetime, and 54% of our kids are going to be dealing with chronic illnesses that they develop before the age of 17. And for me, that hits home to realize that how are we constructing and designing our world? Well, it's like the materials we're using to build, it's the transactional design that permeates everything through our economy. And we have designed a system that is in service towards finance rather than finance in service towards life. And real estate is right at the intersection of all these major areas. And that's really what precipitated us to say, we're not doing sustainable real estate. We want to do regenerative real estate. We want to really show the reciprocal relationship between people and their spaces. And since then, since really 2020, we've gone down this amazing, virtuous, generative, life-giving, heartwarming path that is totally enlivening for me. And I'm really grateful that we didn't need to exit the real estate industry to really go down a path that I think aligns our values with the skills that we picked up in the business.
Wow, that was such an amazing and beautiful story. And I think these days, a lot of people are getting into cause-based businesses, even maybe more so than the nonprofits. And certainly this is a wonderful cause. I mean, basically, you're trying to help the world to be healthier and the people that live in it. So do you actually build the houses yourself? What's the process like with these regenerative homes that you both invest and sell them? I'm a little unclear of your role.
Yeah, it certainly evolved. And I think that is the hallmark of just paying attention is what is the evolution that comes from the inputs that are coming at us. So it originally started off with how do we invest in property and update it from sustainable systems to maybe landscaping with edibles or natives to figuring out how to capture rainwater and like reconnect that hydrological cycle. There is this like nexus of, we have the investing and development background. We want to be putting out these kinds of properties. I got really called towards land revitalization work of how do we go out and actually buy degraded land and then program it so that it springboards biodiversity back. But the funny thing about it is that we started to have property owners come to us from across the country and in some instances from across the world that is like, I have this really special place and I have poured a ton of love and time and money into it. And if I'm talking to another real estate agent, they're talking bedrooms and bathrooms and they don't understand what I've done. But you're drinking from the same cup that I am. Can you help me list this property? And at the same time, we started to get real estate professionals simultaneously, one in New York and one in Hawaii, saying, I really love what you're doing. It captures a spirit that like speaks to who I am. I love the brokerage that I'm at, but they just like kind of pat me on the head and say like, oh, isn't that cute? You want to do like green real estate. Maybe you can get your NAR green designation and I teach people how to compost or something like, or recycle.
Right.
And it's kind of like this afterthought. And we've sat there and really said, we're place-based. We work out of Portland, Oregon. We can't work in Hawaii. We can't work in New York. But along comes COVID and it completely upended our world. And I think people got really used to communicating over Zoom and how do we create digital communities and how do we connect even in or probably because of these really challenging times. And so we figured out that what are we? Are we a marketplace? Are we a real estate brokerage? No, we're a community of real estate professionals that are purpose-driven, that has a marketplace, that has a methodology to bring people through the process of how do you take a conventional property that is extractive, harmful, degradative, and consumptive, and many times we don't even realize it. And then how do we bring them down that journey and give them the skills and the resources and the expertise that they need to create resilient, healthy homes that are beautiful, that resonate, the spirit of what they want to engender for their family and how they want to grow and be nurtured and be held by their home. So that's really what we're doing now. Is I still will invest and develop, although I bought this 80-acre property out in the high desert of Oregon, and I really wanted to showcase what does it look like to build using local earthen materials.
Mhm.
And we're building a retreat center, or designing a retreat center out there using
Ooh,
a technique called rammed earth. And
that's exciting.
it is tremendously exciting. But I
Mhm.
got a text message from a friend of mine saying, there's a wildfire in the area. Have you seen it? I
Oh.
thought, the wildfires, we're just going to have to contend with these on the West Coast now.
Mhm.
6 hours later, I learned the fire took out everything on our
Oh.
property. And that further just really galvanizes and motivates me to say, if we are tired of devastating forest fires that not only will like level properties and communities, but even if you're close to a fire or you're on the West Coast, we're going to have to deal with major smoke every single year. Across the country, we're dealing with droughts, we're dealing with floods, we're dealing with heat domes and extreme events, we're dealing with like ice storms that are taking out entire states' electrical grids. Like it's insane. And we have this really funny way that we forget that we've designed the world that we're living in, and we just kind of like throw up our hands and say, I don't
How
know
did
how we
this
got here,
happen?
and I don't
Yeah.
I don't know how we're
Mhm.
going to get out of this mess. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
if we don't start seeing ourselves as real estate professionals, that in understanding that every single one of us has agency in the ways in which we're inhabiting the planet, then the government's not going to do it for us.
Mhm.
It's got to come from bottom up and top down. And so that's what I just like. If it's investing, if it's working with clients to buy or sell, if it's like trying to create a hub of regenerative businesses, like this is our work right now. And the purpose is woven throughout everything that we do.
When you describe the problems that our Earth is facing, I don't mean to be depressing, but sometimes does it feel like, gosh, there's so much to do and there's so little of us that are working on this. Does it get discouraging, or do you keep that happy attitude and good attitude and positive attitude that you're going to save things?
I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed right now. And I
Mm-hmm.
certainly will go into those moments, especially
Yeah.
whenever you get pictures of, a, your work getting devastated by a
Oh,
fire.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think right now, what's really important is how do we resource ourselves to go into really challenging and complex times? Was
Mm-hmm.
that more than anything, I find that these problems are quite complex, and then they
Mm-hmm.
become political, and right, like underpinning all this is we have to create a livelihood.
Right.
I need money to put food on the table and a roof over our heads and send my son to school and do all the things that we want to do. And do I want to be working in an industry that, the National Association of Realtors is the largest lobbying association in the country,
Mm-hmm.
in member count. There's 1.4 million realtors, I believe. And I guarantee you 1.39 million of those people are saying, we want to help you find your dream home, and we
Mm-hmm.
want to help you sell your house for the most amount of money in the least amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take a marketing genius to figure out, like, do you want to blend into the ubiquity of what everybody else is doing? Or we all know that there's tremendous opportunity and power within the real estate industry, and we can create amazing livelihoods to not only nourish our families, but to like give back to community. Do we want to be harnessing that
Mm-hmm.
and feeling good about the work that we're doing? Like I do. That's why I'm staying in this industry. And
Right.
to know that there's other people that are really passionate about doing that I get to learn from, and that I get to uh, invest in those relationships, and that like that is the life-giving regenerative process, is
Mhm.
building community. Oh my God, sign me up.
Right.
That is just what gives me so much hope, is that we've just begun to get started, and
Mhm.
seeing all these other businesses that you're talking about really align their operations with change that they want to see in the world. Like, that is amazing.
It is amazing. And obviously, you are a community of like-minded people that are broad-sided. You're not just looking at the little picture, you're looking at the welfare of the world, the planet, the people. How do you stay connected with your community?
I find myself in a really interesting position. And this, I'm not sure where you're taking this question, but I've been sitting with this, so I'm going to use this
Mhm.
as my therapy session, and you're my therapist today, Patty. Like,
I hope I don't blow it.
my work that gives me a lot of energy is working very place-based within my local community. And
Okay.
we recently moved to Whidbey Island, which is just north of Seattle by about an hour. And I live in a little village. They call it a city, but it's 1,000 people. And we moved here for a mentorship with an architect named Ross Chapin, who has really pioneered what's called pocket neighborhoods. And he's really helped frame the conversation around regeneration for me, is like, how do we work in community? And how I've done that, and how I built my business as a successful real estate agent, is like getting to know who the architects are, and the builders, and the inspectors, and the chefs, and the farmers, and like creating that network, that hub, that I think is vital towards the kind of business that I've always run, which has always been sphere of influence and referral based. But now that we've really pivoted the business to, we're working with real estate professionals in 10 different states across 4 different time zones, I find that there's this digital community that I'm a part of, as well as a place-based community that I'm a part of. And sometimes it's really hard to reconcile that world. But at
Right.
other times, I realize, like, this is amazing, because I get to learn from my colleagues of what's working in the Hudson Valley, or what's going on in Los Angeles, and like really getting to cross-pollinate ideas, and understanding that we're we're living in so many different communities. I mean, Facebook's a great example of that. Like, you can be in a lot of different communities that are curated by
Mhm.
themes.
Mhm.
Um, so how I balance that with like physical location versus digital communities is a always evolving and a constant learning curve.
I bet it is. So you're very involved in your community there in Washington, in this little, you should call it a township pocket neighborhood. Yes, I love that word. But then you also reach out to 4 different states. What are those states?
Right now we are working in, let me go west to east here,
Okay.
just because that's the mental map that I have in my head. Washington, Oregon, California, Utah, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, New York. Yeah.
That's
That's,
more than 4 states. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think.
yeah, I think we're in 10 now.
10, okay, I might have missed one. Well,
You
so
know,
who would be your client that's not in your neighborhood? Whether, would it be a buyer? Would it be a seller? How would that work? How would they contact you, and what would you likely do for them? And I'm sure there's different scenarios.
yeah. So if we're talking about Latitude as a brand, then
Mm-hmm.
um, really our client is the real estate professional that is choosing to brand themselves Latitude, and pick up the methodology of regenerative real
Ah,
estate.
okay, okay.
And so any kind of buyers and sellers that come into Latitude, they get dispersed towards the change agents that, I mean, we call them change agents, these real estate professionals that um, instead of a real estate agent, they truly are agents of change. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
working place-based in their communities, just as I am working in my local community in that capacity. So um, it gets stretched a little bit when people are outside of the geographic areas that we work, and they have amazing properties, or they want to develop some kind of community or build something that is right up our alley. So we're trying to figure out like what comes first, the clients or the professional, and there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing that we've got going on.
Back to a little bit, you were talking about these different change agents. So just so the editor can find a spot, if you just start with that, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, back up a little bit. You just broke
Okay.
up as well.
Well, I had asked you about the different states and how do you handle it, who would be your ideal client, and then you mentioned that you do it through these agents, these change agents that I guess are a part of your team. So that's what you
Right.
explained. Mhm.
Yeah, then I'll start there. So our work is really done through our community of change agents. And these are real estate professionals that are licensed, that are working very place-based in their communities. And so they are picking up the banner of regenerative real estate and incorporating the education and training and the branding that we do to work with buyers and sellers. And they're starting to really blend in this consultancy piece that we find really critical of. It's one thing to help people or shepherd somebody through a complex transaction where you've got negotiations and inspections. But at the end of the day, you give them the keys and you get your commission check and you put them on your mailing list, and you're kind of good. But our work really is only halfway begun because we're really interested in what is that transformational process. And what's so cool is that there's a Irish landscape designer named Mary Reynolds, and she is just such a force. And she talks about, and this is going to sound real woo-woo to people, but she says that we're all broken, and we all need healing, but humans are really bad at healing ourselves. That a great way to do that is through healing of land and property.
Mm-hmm.
And I really buy that, and I think a lot of us are trying to figure out, how do we do that? What does it look like to live lighter on the land, or to be more resilient in the face of potential catastrophe? And that's where community is really important and resources are really important. So that's really how we do it and operate in a very decentralized manner across 4 different time zones.
Well, that makes perfect sense. So these people are attracted to the cause, the regenerative real estate. They believe in the earth and healing the earth and all that goes along with that. And somehow they find you and become part of your team. But how do they find you?
Well, there's a couple of different marketing platforms that we have. I mean, I think that the pillars that we have as a business is, how do we inspire and how do we educate? And you base all your other decisions off of that. That's really our filter. And I think at the very beginning, one of the really powerful ways is we started the Regenerative Real Estate podcast. And so that is literally just me as a host going out and finding amazing people that are doing incredible work that really showcases the depth and breadth of what is regeneration and how does it meet the built environment. And people will find us through that, or they'll find us through a pretty picture on Instagram. I mean, it's unbelievable that you can put out a property on Instagram and it can captivate somebody's attention for a microsecond, but maybe that's all that they need to go to your website and check out what you're doing. Or, there's just a lot of different ways. And we found that we might not be the best marketing experts out there, but we've stuck with a couple and we're just kind of going deep on that. And we're always looking for ways in which we can do it differently or do it better. And how do we humanize content and stories, like really bring in the power of story. So there's, without getting like too down the marketing rabbit hole, I think the high level is like understanding that there are plenty of people out there that have the same value set that is really looking for this kind of expertise. They are kind of turned off by traditional real estate, and we have to face the fact that like a realtor does have a stigma just like a used car salesman. So how do we remain relevant, and how do we work with the people that need the help they need guidance. But how do we do it in a way in which isn't just based on the transaction, but it is based on the transformation? So that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of how people find us and
Yeah.
what we do for marketing.
Well, I think you and your wife are very inspiring. So is your business kind of two-tiered? You're doing your own sales and buying and selling, but then you have all these people that are a part of your team, change agents that are also working with you?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
see, I see.
And I think that's important of not only do I want to maintain a level of fluency in the arena of which we're working in. Like I think it's one thing if you're to say, look, we want to do sustainable or regenerative real estate and come at it from a very philosophical approach or theory-based approach. There's another thing whenever someone that has been in the industry for 10 years to say, I know the mechanics of real estate. We know how to work with clients. And we're going to showcase that you can change your client base because we've done it. Like I went from working with properties that, are all over the Pacific Northwest, like they're small multifamily properties. I was working with a lot of investors, to saying, I want to go into different kind of spaces that like give me joy, that light me up, that really inspire me, rather than like walking through these like mold infested, the same kind of carpet, the same like beige color on the wall, and figure out how to fix and flip it or fix it up to rental grade quality. And over the course of relatively a short amount of time, we were able to go from this is our bread and butter, doing that kind of working with that kind of a property, to now I get to go work with craftsmen and visionaries and artists and earth tenders, like
Oh,
and
sounds much more
designers.
fun. Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. And those are the people that just like really light me up, that they have the
Exactly.
vision and
Mhm.
they're, even if you go to an architect, and this is what I found is that if you say, hey, I really enjoy your work, I think our clients would enjoy the work, I would love to send referrals your way when people are looking for this kind of work. What we've found is that they typically have project aspirations as well. And they're like, well, it's so funny. I'm really glad that you're contacting me. I might have, like, an example is an architect built this net positive energy house. He and his wife, they wanted to go local, non-toxic materials. They put up a huge solar array using natural light and passive energy design, beautiful space. And no one knew how to value that kind of a property. And he's like, well, can you give me a market analysis of what you think that you can sell this for? Because then I want to go out and build this whole new thing. And I just found like, yeah, they also represent a hub for potential clients of ours, buyers and sellers, but we also represent the ability for them to do their own projects, and we're a referral source for them. So it's just this like generative source that, I've never paid for Zillow leads, and maybe I've never really been in the game of wanting to have $100 million real estate team, but we've done a really good job creating a business that really is supportive of our lifestyle that
Well, you
I
have
feel good
such an
about.
important niche. You mentioned with the retreat center that sadly burned down, but I would think a lot of the holistic retreat centers would want to work with you or someone like you.
Yeah, I think that's where we have more work to do. Is like we've been working with some really cool properties. Now, how do we take it to getting the word out for more of those kinds of property owners? Because everybody needs to sell at some point. Like it's few and far between that somebody will buy a property and then die there, and like
Right.
they don't need a real estate agent in their life ever. And that's where I think, okay, we're at the very beginning, and how do we get known for working with these kinds of unique and extraordinary properties that that they still do need to capture a really good price for it. And sellers are looking for the next stewards of the property, and they want to know that the time and money and energy that they invested in, they can get it back.
Right. I lived in Sedona for about 5 years, and everything is the colors of the red rocks. They're not allowed to have other colors. Even the McDonald's, which my friend owns, they have like the turquoisey color. They don't have the yellow that most McDonald's have. And so the tour bus stops and points it out. So I guess that's part of what you do, is just to make sure that the houses and buildings don't take away from the beauty of an area.
Yeah, how do you be place-based?
Mhm.
You know, real estate, and this is what's so fun, is like taking conventional real estate and then putting on, like, deepening my understanding of it, to realize that not only is real estate contextualized street by street, house by house, it's very different, but so is design, so is so is community, like how the expression of place that happens in Sedona, where
Mhm.
there's these like real earthy rock colors,
Mhm.
and then you've got this huge diurnal swing where it's really hot in the day, and then it
Mhm.
cools down a lot at night,
Right.
and then you're challenged by water. Was it only rains 10 inches a year, and what kind of materials are there to work with? Like, that forms such an amazing and rich tapestry in which
Right.
you can go a million miles deep on, like, what does it mean to express the essence of Sedona
Right.
through a real estate practice.
Yes. Well, I'm so impressed with Latitude and what you and your wife have done. By the way, how did you come up with the name?
Of Latitude,
Mm-hmm.
Latitude represents this double entendre for us, that latitude is the scope of freedom of action or thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have the latitude to do something? But latitude also
Oh,
denotes
mm-hmm.
a very specific place on the planet.
Right.
And we just find that there's so much that we can learn from different places, but we
Mm-hmm.
really want to call in being place-based. Like, what's our latitude on this planet, and
Yeah.
what is our latitude to create this kind of livelihood, and what is our ability to do meaningful work? So Latitude definitely started whenever weren't even thinking about regenerative
Mm-hmm.
real estate, but it just was a bleed over, because it continues to just work with what we're going for.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to ask you a couple more things, Neal. What are your goals moving forward?
What are my goals? That there's a litany of them. I think what I want to be guided by, and we're going through this process right now where we're taking Latitude to be a public benefit corporation. We are raising outside investment dollars, and I'm getting a lot of questions that relate to this, of like, what are your goals? What is enough? What is your end game? What's the exit strategy? And I think for me is, how do I get guided by the impact that I want to have, rather than the number of zeros in my bank account? And I think as long as I am guided by that, then I know that there's a North Star, because it gets real fuzzy for me. Like, I start hanging out with all these amazing entrepreneurs that are very financially successful in their businesses, and I start getting this shiny object syndrome, and I start building in that direction, and then something else will come along and start building in that direction. And so I think at the end of the day, it's how do I create really nourishing spaces and experiences for my family and for my community, and like continue to just try to create an impact in the work that I do.
That makes total sense. You're doing something that's a labor of love. You are, learning, exploring. So as long as that's going well, you're probably going to keep going.
Yeah, and it's fun because we get to do it in community, and there's other people that they have very similar aspirations, and I think
Mhm.
that it's almost revolutionary that we get to work with other people and help other people along that path, and build this vocation so that they can go do the same thing. Of like, I'm not talking that money is a bad thing. I'm talking about, like, we're looking holistically at how do you develop the life that you want, and having a really good business to do it is part of that process. So we just try to look more multidimensionality at what is the goal. Like, is my goal $20 million in net worth? Like, is it a certain level of passive income? All those things are great. They are metrics of success and validation from a marketplace, but it certainly is not my end all be all goal that I'm driving towards.
Gotcha. Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on Icons of Real Estate. Would you let people know how they could listen to your podcast, how they could find your website, how they might be able to get a hold of you if you welcome me?
Yeah, there's three great ways. I first recommend everybody to go check out our website, which is just chooselatitude.com. And then we've got a great social media presence. If you type in Latitude or regenerative real estate, like, there's anybody that's popping up above us for regenerative real estate, then we've got a serious problem. But I host a podcast that I release every other week. And that is such an amazing source of inspiration for me personally. And it's also really humbling to know that other people are tuning in and getting a lot out of it as well. And it's called the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. And now we've really started to branch out into doing the first Tuesday of every month. We have what's called an ecosystem call. And it's more of the how-to for folks, be it homeowners or real estate professionals. How do we start to incorporate this transformational process into renovating properties, redesigning them? Things from last month was how do you do DIY rainwater harvesting on a property? It's things like that, and that's a lot of fun. And I really encourage people that if they're interested to get on our newsletter, you'll get alerted about the listings that we're working with, the upcoming courses that we're doing, or the ecosystem calls that we're doing, and now we've started to do events. And we got a big one in Maine coming up at the end of August, and I'm not sure when this is going to get published, but there's just a myriad of ways to get involved. And I think hearing what other people are interested in and what they have a vision for and what lights them up, that's what I want to hear about. Is like, how do you see your passion, and how does it meet the built environment in which we are supposed to be professionals and experts in, because we can do it together.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's been very inspirational, giving me a lot to think about. Take care, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks.